Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan, and this is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, nothing to return to. Israel's war on Gaza has wiped out entire neighbourhoods and reduced businesses to rubble. So who compensates Palestinians for the destruction? Also this week, enshrined in Germany's constitution, the so-called debt brake has sparked a budget crisis. Calls are growing for borrowing limits to be relaxed. Plus, China and Saudi Arabia agree on their first currency swap, while many nations are increasingly moving away from the US dollar to settle trade. Israel's relentless bombardment of Gaza has killed and injured thousands of Palestinians. The human cost is innumerable. The toll on infrastructure is massive. Put simply, absolute destruction and a lack of basic requirements to sustain life. Entire neighbourhoods, homes, schools, hospitals, churches and mosques have all been targeted. Whoever runs Gaza after the war ends will have to rebuild the Strip and create a functioning economy, while many Palestinians who've managed to see what remains of their homes during a brief lull in attacks were shocked at the scale of the damage.
As you can see, thousands of residential units were destroyed. The same with other residential complexes in the north. Where to go? Where to sleep? This was my house, and now my family and I are homeless. Many are still buried under the debris. I cannot even pick some of my clothes from under the rubble to put on my back. However, we are not leaving. We're holding our ground. Even if I live in a tent, I will not abandon my homeland.
My memories. My home is all my memories. I would never let it go. I lived for 23 years here. I will stay in it even if only a small part of it remains.
It's a massive shock. It took me a lifetime to build this house for me and my brothers. And just like that, I'm back to square one. We are a family of four, and our house is made up of 4 floors. The ground floor is a commercial shop. My brother lives with his family in the first floor, while the other brother on the second. My family and I live on the 4th floor. We're now sitting in what was once the kitchen. That was the fridge and that the oven. This is the only area where we could sit. The rest is a total wreck.
Well, the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to adequate housing, Balakrishnan Rajagopal, has denounced Israel's widespread bombing of homes and infrastructure in Gaza. In a recent report, he said carrying out hostilities with the knowledge that they will systematically destroy and damage civilian housing and infrastructure, rendering an entire city, such as Gaza City, uninhabitable for civilians, is a war crime. Multiple sources have released figures on the extent of damage to infrastructure. Satellite analysis by 2 researchers at the CUNY Graduate Center and Oregon State University shows that nearly half of all buildings across northern Gaza have been damaged or destroyed. The UN says that nearly 45,000 housing units have been demolished. Out of the Strip's 36 hospitals, 28 are no longer functioning. 279 educational facilities have been affected, depriving more than 625,000 students of the basic right to education. Bakeries and mills in the northern part of the Strip have been brought to a standstill due to structural damage and the lack of fuel and flour. Water facilities across Gaza have also been targeted. Well, the latest conflict is estimated to have cost much more than any of the 4 previous wars on Gaza. The 3-week war that began in December 2008 and ended in January 2009 caused destruction amounting to $2 billion. That's according to the World Bank. Hamas says the 8 days of Israeli attacks in 2012 cost Gaza $1.2 billion. Nearly $6 billion was estimated to be the cost of rebuilding Gaza after the 2014 war, and the damage and economic losses from the Israeli attack in 2021 amounted to more than $500 million. Western countries have considered using frozen Russian assets to rebuild Ukraine. Last year, Poland demanded more than $1 trillion in World War II reparations from Germany. Also in 2022, Iraq completed the payment of more than $52 billion in compensation for damage caused by its 1990 invasion of Kuwait. So, who pays for the destruction in Gaza? And how much? Joining us now is Tamer Kamut. Tamer is an assistant professor in public policy and administration at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Good to have you with us on Counting the Cost. Is Gaza even going to be habitable after all of this, given the scale of the destruction that we've just outlined?
Yes, there is a chance it would be habitable if an urgent early recovery and reconstruction plan is initiated immediately after the end of this war. So there is a chance, of course. I mean, Gazans have nowhere to go. So there is no plan B for Gazans. So we have to believe that it has to be habitable and a normal place like any other place in the world. And this depends on the international community's will to create normal, conducive social, economic conditions for Gazans to stay in Gaza. And by default, this is related to how will they plan and implement the reconstruction plan of Gaza after this war ends.
Who makes those plans? How much are those plans going to cost? Is the rebuilding going to cost? And who pays?
So just to give the viewers a perspective, like, you know, in 2009, the first reconstruction operation, there were donors, after the Shalit war in Gaza, donors pledged nearly $5 billion. In 2012, CAST-led operation, there was 3.2 pledges as well. So given the size, the sheer size of construction now, we are literally talking about something similar to, I would call it a new Marshall Plan for Gaza. This might exceed 30 billion plus, you know? So it's huge amounts of money. Of course, Palestinians will not pay. If we live in a fair and ethical world, the Israelis have to pay because they caused this destruction. And they should not, and I believe that there should be accountability when it comes to this. Because most of the destruction that happened in Gaza, this is private ownership and also aid and donations that came to support the two-state solution since the beginning of also 1994. So we're talking about building hospitals, government premises, ministries, civil infrastructure, name it. Mainly, these are donors' money. When I say donors, I say Western donors, Arab donors, and international donors. But Western donors, especially the Europeans, the EU is one of the largest donors to the Palestinian Authority, followed by, the Americans, Japan, then Arab donors, you know, the Gulf countries, you know, Islamic countries. So this is tax money. When it comes to Western countries, this is tax money. This is tax money being wasted because of Israel's actions. And Israel has no limits when it comes to this because the subject or the issue of protecting aid dividends, which is aid, you know, that should contribute to peace, should be brought into, to be discussed on the table by the donors and Israelis. Because there is donors fatigue now. Many donors now, they're tired from seeing their money being wasted in every eruption of conflict or a circle of violence in occupied Palestine. So there has to be a discussion on this now. Especially in the future of Gaza after this war ends. Donors should be very blunt about it and say, we will invest, we will of course support Palestinians to recover, but there has to be conditions this time. It's not going to be free aid, especially to the Israelis.
Is Israel going to be forced to pay, though? Who's going to force Israel to pay if it's decided that Israel should be paying? Well,
here we talk about the just world and a just international system. If Iraq had to pay for Kuwait, as you've mentioned,
exactly,
and if the idea of using seized Russian assets, frozen Russian assets, to rebuild Ukraine, then we have a precedent that it should continue this way. You know, correct? But it needs international will. Are Western countries, main Western countries, ready to use this on Israel or not? I'm not sure, to be honest. But if we live in a just world, it should happen. Israel should be accountable, not only for the destruction, also for human losses. Yeah. All these civilians who have lost their wives, they have to be compensated for
I was going to ask you about, you talked about personal ownership as well. A lot of the property that's been destroyed was personally owned, privately owned.
Yes,
This is not businesses or organizations.
Yes.
Even if they could have got insurance in Gaza, it wouldn't have paid out because this is an act of war. No. So surely people need to be compensated for their individual losses, not just of property, but for lives lost as well.
Yes, exactly. There's just for your viewers to know, there's no insurance in Gaza. Insurance is not a scheme implemented in Gaza or Gazans know about. So same like in other countries in the world. So these are people, who psychologically they have to suffer for the loss of their loved ones, their houses, their properties, their means of income. It's hard to me even to talk about financially compensation people who have lost their loved ones. Money will not bring the lost ones back to life, correct? But at least that's the least donors should do, at least to to try to help them to get back to their lives.
Yeah.
You know? So.
And you talked about donors footing the bill for some of the reconstruction costs. But donors are not really going to be willing to invest, to put more money into Gaza if there's a danger of this happening again. So that there has to be a political solution alongside a financial one.
Yes, Adrian, and this is an excellent point. I mean, yes, I mean, it would be another waste of resources and energy if money comes in a fragile context again. Now, but doesn't mean that donors should stop intervening. Now, I'm all in for humanitarian aid to kick in now and even to be upscaled, humanitarian aid, which is necessary to keep people alive. It's water, food, shelter, clothes, name it, I mean. So this is a must. You cannot leave people alone in these situations. Once this war is over, and again, this is a big question because we don't know, everyone is talking about a future arrangements to govern Gaza or Gaza after the war. We don't know what's going to happen. What's the political outcome of this war? Meaning, if Hamas is still going to be in power or not, it will step down and leave another entity, be it a technocrat government or a government run by the Palestinian Authority, rule Gaza. We don't know. I mean, there are so many scenarios that are being discussed, but we don't know which scenario will be the feasible one, the most feasible one, because the war is not over yet.
Yeah.
So, however, if we reach to a scenario where, let's say, Hamas is not involved in governing Gaza, this will be a relief for many Western donors who have refused or who have been very shy of supporting Palestinians because of Hamas's control of, let's say, governance institutions, correct? Other donors, like, let's say, Arab donors, Muslim donors, they don't have any conditions. They support any projects. So let's say if a ministerial building is damaged now or was bombed during this war, some Arab donors will say, I can rebuild it, I have no problems, even if it's run by Hamas or will be run by Hamas. But then European donors, Western donors will say, no, this is a no-go for me. If I'm going to build this and it will be used officially by Hamas authorities, they will say, no, this is a no-go for me. I'll just focus on humanitarian aid. Then we'll end up with the situation of fragmenting aid. And this will not go well for the Palestinians because after this war and the large scale of destruction, we need a systematic, comprehensive reconstruction plan that really tackles everything together. And it's not about just reconstructing what have been bombed or damaged. It's about creating a sustainable future for Gaza, which means Israeli control measures, blockades have to be also addressed. I mean, Israel cannot keep its control over the borders and also its control over, let's say, the reconstruction process by delaying materials, vetting beneficiaries of aid, because Israel has a famous history of doing this, delaying these construction materials. So we need a sense of normality. So it's about creating a sustainable future of Gaza, not just addressing the immediate outcomes of war, but also creating an environment for Gaza to be a normal country, a normal strip like any other countries in the world. That's the issue.
Sama, great to talk to you on Counting the Cost.
My pleasure.
Many thanks indeed for being with us.
My pleasure.
Now, in Germany, rules limit how much debt the government can take on. The constitution caps budget deficits at 0.35% of GDP, except in an extreme emergency. The so-called debt brake was enacted in 2009 and was meant to stabilise public finances after the global financial crisis. But a strict interpretation of the rule by the nation's top court struck down billions of dollars in planned spending, sparking a budget crisis. Now calls are growing to abandon the borrowing limits, as Dominic Kane reports from Berlin.
This is how Germany's finance ministry tries to explain its Schuldenbremse, or debt brake. Governments can't borrow much more than 1/3% of GDP each year, except in extreme emergencies. In theory, the mantra to ministers is pretty simple: live within your means. In practice, it's proved anything but. It was Angela Merkel's government that enshrined the debt brake into law during the credit crunch.
They felt it necessary to anchor something in the Constitution that put a debt brake on spending to show responsibility. And of course, Germany has always sort of wagged a finger at other countries in the EU that overspent, and broke EU debt rules.
But now the finger is being wagged at the government here in Berlin, because when Finance Minister Christian Lindner tried to use unspent money borrowed to fight COVID to finance climate change policies, the Supreme Court in Karlsruhe ruled that to be unconstitutional, leaving a multi-billion-dollar hole in this year's budget and causing consternation in capital markets.
German budgetary policy is a bit like satirical reality. It is important that we get back on reliable ground relatively quickly. It is unacceptable that one of the largest industrialized nations allows itself to pursue a budgetary policy that is constitutionally questionable.
The political effect of the Karlsruhe ruling is also profound, something Olaf Scholz himself acknowledged in Parliament.
This ruling creates a new reality for the federal government and for all current and future federal and state governments. A reality, however, that makes it more difficult to achieve important and widely shared goals for our country.
Having improvised a solution for 2023, ministers are now having to work out next year's budget and the remote possibility of a $220 billion shortfall, which could mean the need to slash spending.
There might be some cuts for benefits for the richer people in the society. That could be one way out, and that would then they would also have some smaller budget cuts for the poorer households in Germany.
One analyst says behind closed doors, political leaders here believe the law should be made more suitable to today's realities.
Many politicians agree that we need a change of that clause or an integration of this investment clause into the debt break, or maybe even get rid of it and come up with something new which is more appropriate to solve the challenges we are facing in Germany.
But to do that, the coalition government will need the help of the main opposition party in both houses of parliament. And so far, at least, its leader seems to favour new elections over new laws. Dominic Kane for Counting the Cost, Berlin.
China is Saudi Arabia's top trading partner and the largest buyer of its oil. Trade between the two nations amounted to more than $106 billion in 2022. Their relationship broadened last year. Leaders of the two nations signed a comprehensive strategic partnership during a visit by the Chinese leader Xi Jinping to Riyadh. The agreement, worth billions of dollars, included collaboration on infrastructure projects and technology and was hailed by Beijing as an epoch-making milestone in the development of Chinese-Arab relations. The two nations have recently moved to strengthen financial cooperation too. They've signed a local currency swap agreement worth nearly $7 billion, which will be valid for 3 years and could be extended. Several countries in the Middle East signed similar agreements with China over the past decade, including Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt. Beijing is believed to have the largest network of currency swaps with at least 40 countries. Well, currency swaps are agreements whereby central banks lend and borrow each other's currencies on a specified date. They then exchange the money back at an agreed interest rate. China's swaps are seen as part of its push to internationalize the yuan. Global central banks tapped a record amount of the Chinese currency in foreign exchange swaps lines in the first quarter of the year. The outstanding balance of all foreign currency swaps was more than $15 billion by the end of March. That's according to the People's Bank of China. The jump came after a growing number of countries moved to settle their trade with China in local currencies in a bid to reduce their reliance on the US dollar. The greenback remains the most traded currency by far, but its share of foreign reserves, the amount of dollars that countries put by for a rainy day, has declined to a record low of 58% last year. By comparison, China's yuan stands at less than 3%. The Chinese currency is still behind the euro, the Japanese yen, and the British pound. Well, joining us here in Doha is Wael Makarem, who is the financial market strategist lead at the global multi-asset brokerage group XNES. Good to have you with us, Wael.
Hello.
$7 billion is a huge amount to the likes of you and I and anyone watching, but in global economy terms, it's a relatively small amount. So how significant is this currency swap arrangement between China and Saudi Arabia?
Thank you, Adrian, for the invite first. Actually, it's quite good for a start, since we know China is looking forward to expand its presence in the region. And of course, Saudi and the economy recently, it's been performing well for the past few years since COVID, and there's a lot of plans for expansion and the vision for 2030. So definitely, it's a good arrangement going forward. As you mentioned, it's a 3 years arrangement and could be even.
But who's it better for? You say that Saudi's economy is on the rise. China's at the moment is in a spot of bother, isn't it?
Actually, both of them would benefit at a certain threshold. So, for example, if we take into consideration for Saudi, the exports of Saudi Arabia towards China, they've been increasing at a pace of at least 13% for the past years, every year. And this is something very crucial to have such an arrangement. On the other side, China is looking to secure its energy supplies. And we know that China is a top importer for Saudi's energy. So this definitely plays a vital role in order to expand this relation. It started it could expand to other sectors. There's a lot of opportunities. We know that Chinese economy is the second in the world. They're trying to expand. They're trying to recover as much from COVID. And of course, Saudi Arabia could find a lot of opportunities in the Chinese economy, while also through the vision of 2030, through the Belt and the Belt and Road initiatives. Also, China is looking for more strong partners like Saudi Arabia.
So, what are the implications of this newfound relationship between the two countries for the rest of us?
For the rest of actually, like having more of these two relationships, it's better for the global economy because this would facilitate trade, and it also would make it easier to do more investments, and this would create opportunities. So, of course, having such arrangements is good for the economy. And if we see a lot of these arrangements happening, you mentioned that China has at least a network of 40 countries with these arrangements. So this is also facilitating business more and more, and this should play a good role in expanding the role of the Chinese economy in the global economy. And this would, in turn, come back to good opportunities.
And what does this currency swap arrangement and others like it with China mean for the US dollar, the greenback?
Actually, a lot of parties are excited about what do we call de-dollarization, what we heard about it recently a lot on the media. However, we're still a little bit far away from that. If we just look at some figures, still the US dollar reserves are around 59% of global reserves of central banks. Still, the trade funded by the dollar were around 84% this year. Yes, China's such an arrangement that China is doing with a lot of counterparties are increasing its role and the internationalization of the yuan. However, we're still very far away from just reaching where the dollar is at the moment.
Okay, so Saudi Arabia expected to join the BRICS nations early in 2024. What do you make of that? Is that a natural fit for Saudi Arabia?
Actually, it's a good step because BRICS are looking to, especially if you look at India and China, they're looking to secure their energy supplies, and this is one. Second, there's a lot of chances for these parties to contribute to better performance of each other. We know recently everyone is looking to expand their economy, especially post-COVID and all these. We're looking at China, we're looking at India, and even with the plans that Saudi Arabia has for Vision 2030, it needs such good strategic members that could help in the prosperity of the kingdom's economy.
Do you think we could ever see Saudi oil sold in yuan?
It's like the Chinese were asking for that, and you mentioned the Chinese president was in Saudi Arabia last year, and he also stressed on that. However, it's still not that easy. This currency swap agreement is starting for non-oil trades. It could in the future turn into that, but going into that way, it needs a lot of geopolitical assessments.
But could you ever see the day, is it in the distant future, will it ever happen, or the near future, whereby a currency like the yuan would replace the dollar as the preferred international currency of last resort?
It could happen, but not in the foreseeable future. It could take years and decades for a currency to replace the dollar because of many factors. However, yes, after the crisis that we've seen in Europe, a lot of countries are looking to reduce the reliance and dependency on the US dollar. And these initiatives, they are part of this unwinding of the dependency and reliance. However, just going into a currency that would replace the dollar at the moment, in the foreseeable future, it's a bit hard.
Well, it's been really good to talk to you on Counting the Cost.
Same here.
I think I understood all of that as well. So thanks for explaining it so well to us. Many thanks indeed.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And that's our show for this week. Get in touch with us if you want to comment on anything that you've seen. You can Tweet me on X, I'm at A Finnegan. Try to use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or you can drop us a line. Counting the cost at aljazeera.net is our email address. As always, there's plenty more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That takes you straight to our page, and there you'll find individual reports, links, and entire episodes for you to catch up on. That's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan in Doha. From the whole team here, thanks for being with us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.